Microtransactions, live service, industry practices that are perceived to provide a sense of pride and accomplishment but are actually egregious, manipulative, and predatory.
Welcome to modern gaming!
Now, to be fair, they aren't innately bad in of themselves. In fact, there have been numerous instances where these practices have been implemented to great effect. However, games have evolved to becoming vessels for quick cash grabs and is slowly being stripped off of the artistic integrity they originally exhibited. Fully priced games that still featured abhorrent microtransactions are slowly becoming the norm and is affecting franchises of beloved properties. There are those that were successful in breaking from the shadows of their relatives, while some were not so fortunate, and that's what happened with Guardians of the Galaxy with Avengers. Marred by the implementation of its live service components, Avengers ended up the biggest disappointment of the year. But that Cyberpunk had to say hold my beer and put Avengers further to the side, ultimately fading away to absolute irrelevancy. Because the damage has been done, Guardians had a rough start when it first got announced. Players were understandably skeptical, including me, and some even did not consider picking up the game at all. Despite the fact that it would be single player, will feature no microtransactions, and would be a standalone game with no DLCs planned, people were either still on the fence or not interested at all. And it's a shame, really. For me, it is one of the best games to have ever come out the past year. Its story, phenomenal. The gameplay could have been better, but quite fun all around. The graphics, oh man. If Makoto Shinkai Films encapsulates how much of a visual splendor anime films could possibly be, then Guardians of the Galaxy must be the weathering review of video games. The buffet of vibrant colors and intricate details sprinkled within each set piece within Guardians just make the rainbow look all grayed out in comparison, and it just makes its universe look so expansive and immersive, and the animations in general are quite smooth as well. It is just crazy how beautiful this world looks. However, the one thing I'd really like to highlight is just how much of an achievement its narrative really is, and why I think it is, as I said, phenomenal. The Guardians aren't really portrayed in a heroic light. They are a bunch of misfits that got together as mercenaries for hire under the guise of being, as the title says, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Gardeners of the Galaxy?
What? No! Rocket! So I let Groot fill out the paperwork. I fixed it with an addendum.
And when you start the game, you'd quickly realize that their motivations aren't propelled by some noble notion like saving the galaxy or preserving the greater good. In fact, they are a bunch of criminals with very hefty rap sheets under their belts, with some being granted pardons just because they aided significantly in a war effort. They are in it for the money, fame, and potential opportunities that such recognition can give. And in that regard, it does provide realism to the fact that in the real world, when you're just starting out, you want to get into a job not really to help other people per se, but rather to make a name for yourself, to provide for yourself, and to eventually be granted opportunities that would further your career in life. Or just earn enough for today so that you can live on to the next. For the Guardians, they are just trying to scrape by on what they receive from the quote-unquote conquest they achieve. And the main plot lends itself to put the characters in situations wherein they become more fleshed out and nuanced. Players assume the character of Peter Quill, and so you experience the entirety of the game through his perspective. And what I love about this is that throughout the game there are certain moments when we're able to peek through the remnants of his past, the most significant of which is his memories of his mother. And despite the sporadic nature of these sequences, The game is able to effectively convey to the player the kind of relationship that Peter had with his mother.
Ma!
What?
Nobody says far out anymore.
Oh, well, your mom does. Maybe we should see if we could get tickets to see them live.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Your mom may not look it, but I was quite the rocker when I was your age. Your father and I would just lie on the hood of my old Chevy and listen to Black Sabbath and...
You like Black Sabbath?
Like I said, your mom's cooler than you think.
And in turn contributes to showcase one of the core themes of the game: family. In the past decade, we've experienced different depictions of the theme of family in video games. We have seen it portrayed in games like The Last of Us, the Red Dead Redemption series, and the most notable and lauded example in gaming history, Fast and Furious Crossroads.
Now you've got a new family.
Okay, maybe not that, but the point is that each of these games utilized each of their unique aspects to convey a sense of familial connection between the main character and the rest of the supporting cast. It didn't matter whether they are of kin or related by blood, or just a bunch of people with a shared experience. What mattered was that these groups of people shared a bond of which they held together with some kind of value, whether it's loyalty, courage, or any other value they deemed worthy. And this is clearly evident in Guardians from both a narrative and gameplay perspective, as you and your teammates will engage in many conversations throughout the journey as you go from point A to point B. You have conversation options in certain moments that could elicit different responses from your teammates, and as the story progresses, you learn even the deepest desires of some of the characters, as there will be some sequences where you'll be able to explore them. Relationships in video games, especially in recent implementations, are often measured by some sort of metric, and you gain a semblance of progression by witnessing this metric increase by giving gifts, engaging in some kind of special event, or desperately pressing X hoping that the next time there's an option to have sex.
Our last chance to show each other how we feel. I want this to be special.
I want this, Liara. I do. But are you sure you're ready?
I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Will you join with me, Shepard? Let our bodies and minds unite.
Yes! Yes! You did it!
I thought you'd never ask.
Yes! You can fight like a crocodile, run like a leopard, but you never be better than Commander Shepard.
Here in Guardians, you have none of that, but instead, relationships progress as the story progresses. And instead of looking out for some metric, here you're able to find certain items in each area that might trigger some memory for a particular teammate. And while getting these items won't have gameplay related benefits, what you'll have instead is a well-told and very insightful sub-story that further fleshes out the backstories of each of the Guardians.
Turns out the dolls were a lesson on the importance of not getting attached. To help us understand that, he took Nebula's doll and threw it into the incinerator. I started collecting these a few years ago. After I knew I'd never see her again. It's dumb, but I guess I'd do it for her.
While this information isn't really essential in understanding the main narrative, it completely deepens each character and contributes to another core theme present in the game: grief. Despite the comedic nature of which these characters are presented in, they all have something in common. They all suffered a harrowing and painful past. Some experienced abuse and some experienced loss. They carry these traumatic experiences even after they have joined the group, and you can witness how these experiences affect them as you play through the game. It explains why Rocket has an unnatural mortified reaction towards water. It explains why Gamora felt so furiously enraged toward the villains near the end. They carry these burdens like massive boulders in their backs whilst trying to live the most of what's remaining in their lives. And the game goes through very interesting directions just to showcase what I thought was such an important message that could pretty much resonate with everybody. Letting go of the past so that you can move on towards the future. As cliche and cheesy as it sounds, it is something that is very difficult to go through and is essentially easier said than done. To give further context, I would have to tread in a more spoilery section of the game, so if you don't want to be spoiled, then please skip to this time. However, if you've already played the game or just don't care about spoilers, then by all means, proceed shortly with the video. Jacques is by far the most peculiar among all the members of the team. His dry, aloof, and very serious nature makes him susceptible to being gullible and very literal. Prior to joining the Guardians, he actually had a wife and daughter who were unfortunately killed by Thanos. During the game, a mysterious entity took hold of him and granted him to witness a so-called promise. This promise is an illusion created from the deepest desires of the ones witnessing it, and it was revealed that the promise Jacques was experiencing depicted a peaceful family life with his wife and daughter. And this was going in a loop. The same place, in the same time, in the same situation. And this really crushed me, knowing all he ever wanted was to be reunited with his family once more. And what broke me even further was that I knew I had to snap him out of it because none of that was real. And it was becoming even more detrimental for him as he was being brainwashed with his promise and continually losing himself in the process. And Jacques, upon realizing this, knew that the only thing he can do was to live on for his departed family and preserve their legacy by living in their stead. And this felt so personal and grounded in reality that even I had to snap myself out of it, realizing that Jacques is every single one of us. As we go on with our lives, we may have already encountered experiences that we either cherish and remember fondly, or some we would rather hide beneath the deepest recesses of our minds. But one thing's for sure is that we all have expressed our grief in some way, shape, or form towards a person or an event in our lives that completely changed it forever. But Guardians of the Galaxy shows us that each and every moment in our pasts, whether they're tragedies and or triumphs, builds us to who we are in the present. While expressing such grief can be a tumultuous, complicated, and at times a lengthy process, we all have our own way in dealing with it. We can accept what has already come to pass and refrain from clinging to things that might not be there anymore, which in turn lets us focus on what could be instead of what was. It also shows us that family isn't limited to just kinship or by blood. It could very well be someone or anyone for that matter. For our characters, they just happen to be lost souls who found solace with each other's presence and decided to brave the galaxy together despite their contrasting differences. Guardians of the Galaxy is essentially the Mass Effect game we could only hope to have again. And it's just a shame that the negative impact that rippled out from the Avengers affected people's perception on the kind of game Guardians actually is. Not only is the data from Steam charts at an all-time low, but even Square Enix has expressed disappointment with its sales figures, that they even refrain from giving out an approximate number. This game truly deserves so much more. The developers were able to achieve such a remarkable feat in its narrative that it should have had more support than what was actually being given. While the game did win Best Narrative of 2021 at the Game Awards, not a lot of players seem to care, as the concurrent number of players as of this time is still at an all-time low compared to other single-player games. I can only hope that more people will discover this truly underrated gem and experience its story and steel themselves for this wild and emotional space odyssey.
Broken.